Is called Farther Down the Rabbit Hole. I'm going to continue part 2 with Misprision of Treason and what it means to have a general strike. The word misprision of treason was called to my attention by Webster Tarpley. He's a scholar on 9/11 truth. And according to Webster, until we address the events that happened at 9/11, all of the good things that we want to do in society, we can't do because so much is justified in the name of what happened at 9/11, and we know really very little about what happened. So without further ado, let's go on, and I've put together some little bits and pieces in a way that I'm very well known for to try to weave together more of our history so that we can know how to move into the future. So.
If President Kerr actually tried to get something more liberal out of the regents in his telephone conversations, why didn't he make some public statement to that effect? And the answer we received from a well-meaning liberal was the following. He said, would you ever imagine the manager of a firm making a statement publicly in opposition to his board of directors? That's the answer. I ask you to consider, if this is a firm, and if the Board of Regents are the Board of Directors, and if President Kerr, in fact, is the manager, and I tell you something, the faculty are a bunch of employees, and we're the raw materials, but we're a bunch of raw materials that don't mean to have any process upon us, don't mean to be made into any product, don't mean to end up being bought by some clients of the university, be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Savio of the free speech movement in Berkeley, and it was a very exciting time. And what's interesting about those times is that this whole issue of free speech was something that brought together very diverse groups. So take a listen to this.
This entire situation is that there's been a coalition that I think is completely unusual in politics. There's been a coalition from Youth for Goldwater all the way over from the Young Socialist Alliance. And usually these two groups don't even speak together, let alone sit in the same table and work out general policies and platforms. And I think that I'm proud to say that American students are united on one issue, and that's the First Amendment privileges of freedom of speech, the right to advocate and discuss at any time, at any place, as long as it doesn't disturb classes and interfere with traffic.
Our meetings lasted.
So interesting about what's going on today with impeachment is that Webster Tarpley called to my attention what misprision of treason was. In other words, impeachment can take place when a high officer, like the president, doesn't fulfill the agreement that he has with the people in carrying out their wishes. And if the media doesn't tell us what's really going on, and we don't know, then we need to find and develop other media and other sources. So that's what's so exciting, because publications like this ensure that the status quo can keep going, because the status quo is doing its responsibility. However, impeachment will never take place unless you can determine what is the largest, the biggest, the most flagrant violation of a breach of trust, of confidence, of the agreement between the people and the leaders. And today, the biggest breach of confidence has to do with what happened at 9/11. How did those buildings come down, and who was responsible for making them come down? And this is a very delicate situation because a lot of people have a lot to hide. And those of us who are great believers in nonviolent communication have to understand that in order for us to make our requests, we have to have some idea of how those requests can be heard and can be acted upon. Again, impeachment can't take place unless we address 9/11. And what's so exciting about 9/11 is this is one issue that unites the country. This is an issue where people, whether they're liberal or whether they're conservative, if they know the facts, they can handle the truth and they can figure out what the next steps will be. The free speech movement, that what you heard of Mario Savio, he was talking, I think, around 1964 at the Berkeley campus. The regents had decided that all of the tables that the political literature was distributed from were no longer allowed on campus. They were thrown out. And this was one issue that brought together all of the people who had tables. It wasn't just people that were working on the civil rights movement or later on what would become Vietnam. These were Youth for Goldwater. These are conservatives. And those New Yorkers who happened to have the time, like myself, to listen to radio stations from other parts of the country will see that even the most redneck radio stations, when they start to realize what happened during 9/11, they unite and they come together. And that's the excitement of the time that we have right now. And Misprision of Treason, when we set about on this process, it isn't something that should be done from the point of view of a lot of anger, of a lot of desire for punishment, but just saying, you haven't accomplished this position, you haven't carried it out with the fullest responsibility to the people, and therefore it's time to step down. That's all impeachment means. It just means step down. So, to the word liberal.
We were told the following: if President Kerr actually tried to get something more liberal out of the regents in his telephone conversations, why didn't he make some public statement to that effect? And the answer we received from a well-meaning liberal was the following. He said, would you ever imagine the manager of a firm making a statement publicly in opposition to his board of directors? That's the answer. I ask you to consider, if this is a firm, and if the Board of Regents are the Board of Directors, and if President Kerr in fact is the manager, then I tell you something, the faculty are a bunch of employees, and we're the raw materials. But we're a bunch of raw materials that don't mean to have any process upon us, don't mean to be made into any product, don't mean to end up being bought by some clients of the university, be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings.
So the point here is that liberal, that was the word that I didn't understand Mario Savio saying, that Kerr, the president of the university, had gone to the Board of Regents and he asked for something more liberal. And then he said, our well-meaning liberal came back with this. And then said that he didn't feel. Why get so stuck to our labels? Well, these were just strategies. A liberal strategy to receive a certain result, a conservative strategy. Let's get beyond strategies and let's see the importance of understanding 9/11 truth. Otherwise, we get limited with our labels and our strategies and our viewpoints, as we can see here.
There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Yeah, now that's quite an excursion for a spiritual show to take. I don't know how you can get more extreme into politics than to have some of the extraordinarily inspired speeches by Mario Savio of the free speech movement in Berkeley in the 60s. But in looking on that and having considered, because I'm also a Berkeley girl, I was just barely in high school at that time, when I plot that against the experiences I've had since then, of course I was only an observer in all of what was going on. Having gone through meditation practices, many different kinds, having taught meditation on Army bases in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Also, I taught meditation in San Quentin prison later on. But and then eventually I made a lot of money in cellular telephone licenses, which is why I'm so sensitive to what's happening to public access. And Iris, the producer I had a few days ago, I had an excerpt of her talking about her strategy to ensure that public access stays alive and well in New York by pointing out to the politicians who are voting on the different bills that originally the cables that were put into the ground weren't even paid for by the cable companies. And as a result of using this cable and so on, they said they'd give something back, and now they're kind of like forgetting about it. So I've had personal experience with that because I got a license in cellular telephones. I got a license in Kentucky for 13 counties in Kentucky, and we brought service to, geez, I can't even remember how many people right now, but a lot of people. And the license was valued according to the population that the license served. It was called a POP. And each person using a cellular phone was worth $2,000 to the value of the license. So now you get some idea why they might give away cell phones. At the time, I remember one of my business partners said, let's just give away phones. And everybody was outraged at it. And now it's like common practice. In any case, we eventually sold our cellular telephone license for over $20 million. So I understand what it means to be given the privilege to serve the society. And that's what I said earlier too, that if you're in a society and you have an agreement to own land, that's a lot of power. But in my case, it was like having real estate in the sky. And in the case of the cable companies right now, we really need to consider what we deserve. Now, this whole question of deservability and human rights, this is something very fascinating to a student of spiritual science, which is what I am, to consider who ensures these rights. We always talk about human rights, but who's going to ensure them? And when you're going to woo somebody away from a different position, they don't want to be coming to your position if they're not convinced that the power behind you can ensure something that they can count on, that they can take to the bank. So, with this in mind, I want to consider one strategy here.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All things came to be through him. Through him was life, and this life was the light of the human race. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. And we saw his glory, the glory as of the Father's only Son, full of grace and truth.
Who is this Word made flesh? This Christ, this Jesus? What did he look like?
Again, on my Misprision show, I wanted to continue that when I was considering the importance of a general strike. And this sort of a scary thing, and we like to think, oh, all that happened in the past. Or I was talking to my stepmother, and she said, these women that threw themselves out of the building that was on fire because the doors were locked, because they wanted to keep out the union agitators. Oh, those were just isolated incidents. But, you know, the world that we're enjoying today, for those of us who are enjoying, is something that has been created through the efforts and really the blood of others before us. It's something that people believed in these liberties and this Constitution and the hope of what this country could be. So we just saw before one strategy. Christians believe that Jesus was a perfect human being, and he was more than a human being, he was divine. That's the belief of the Christians. And now I want to consider the belief of the Jews. And I'm going to show you now a rabbi answering questions to Harold Channer, who's asking him about the state of Israel. And we'll see another strategy, and then after that I'll come back again and see if we can bring this all together in order to understand how we can create new realities by very precisely and carefully understanding exactly the position that we're in. So, let's carry on here.
Had said about trying to destroy the Nazi Holocaust and so forth. But the idea of the establishment of the State of Israel is, in your idea, your interpretation, is not in keeping with Torah True interpretation. Or could you address yourself to that
Well,
of the modern expression of Zionism?
as I mentioned before, there is the Torah and the commandments and the rules of the Torah concerning our deeds, what we may do and we shouldn't do. But there is the preparation to keep up these deeds, is the holiness infused in us by God. By the covenant.
I just want to pause here to say that this is a part that people get a lot of reaction to, but my experience has been in different parts of the world, it's when people do not practice their religions or their processes, and Tantra can be considered a process, which I'll elaborate on at a later date, and this is when we run into problems. That's why I'm playing this, this rabbi who I respect very greatly.
To our forefathers, that we are the people who can perform the holy commandments, having in ourselves the holy inheritance, the holy preparations for doing so. This holy contents of the Jewish people is also expressed in the way how we live collectively in our land and how we have been dispersed through the world among all the other peoples in the world. We have not gone out from the land of Israel because we have been weak militarily, or we have been unable to put up a defense against our adversaries. To put you on one quotation, Jeremiah, the prophet, said, I will quote this in Hebrew if you don't mind.
Please.
Lo yemini malchai eretz ki yuvoi tsar v'oyav b'sharai Yerushalayim. All the kings of the world did not believe that the enemy will be capable of breaking through the defenses of the Jewish people and invade Jerusalem. Because we were militarily and physically quite capable to defend ourselves. We have been driven out to the godly will in a godly manner. The Talmud says that the king of Rome, when he came to destroy the Jewish people in Israel, he's thrown an arrow to the east and it's fallen in Jerusalem. He's thrown an arrow to the west and it fallen in Jerusalem. To the north, to the south, it's fallen Jerusalem. It was a godly will expressed and done in a revelation of a godly manner to drive us out of our land.
For the sins that had been committed?
For the godly sins, a punishment. For the misdeeds from the godly manner which we have done whilst we have been having our kingdom. The ingathering of the Jews back to our land is not a revolution which the African people have made against their conqueror, or against the American people have made against England.
Yes, no.
No. It's a different thing entirely. Inasmuch as the godly contents of the Jewish people prepares us, conditions us to do the godly commandments of the Torah, that godly contents prepares us and conditions us to be ingathered back to Israel in a godly, supernatural way.
And how is this way? When? How is this way? What?
This is bound up with the completion of the destiny of the world. When the destiny of the world, all the world, will be coming to the point when God Almighty wants to reveal his godliness to the people, the Jewish people will be redeemed in a godly fashion, in a godly manner. And that redemption will not be to put us in a state amongst the other states.
At war.
Not the question exists if the state of Israel has been built up by natural manner, by revolutions, by terrorism, by bombs, and the religious Jews want that the same state of Israel should be built up in a godly manner. The ingathering and the ultimate solution for the Jewish people is the destiny of the Jewish people. And this destiny is not meant to be a land amongst the lands, a people amongst the people, and a power amongst the powers.
Until?
Okay, so here we're coming into a consideration of what new realities must mean, because the time is going to go quickly now. A covenant with God is a covenant of a power that's lesser power with a power that's a greater power. Nonviolent communication is about power with, not using strategies of power over. When the good rabbi was talking about punishment, I believe from having listened to him very carefully, and it's quite a long interview that Harold had with him, if you listen very carefully, it's a childish notion of God to think it's some big figure, you know, like a super big human being who's sitting there with his laptop keeping credits and debits of what we've done good and bad. But as we advance from this childish understanding of God, we'll see that the notion of punishment is also a notion that will advance. And when that notion has advanced, we'll have a much deeper understanding about how exciting the times are today. I said that misprision of treason is something that can be exciting. It can unite us. The differences that are going on with the different religions when they're considered from a fundamentalist point of view and they start to conflict with each other, my religion is right only if yours is wrong, is again an exciting moment that we can start to transcend and go into new realities. It's a fundamentalist, a purist, someone who's very focused. There's a great beauty in that focus, because that focus will take them into deeper and deeper truths. But I believe we have to understand a quantum mechanical point of view of what time and space is, so that we can take these times that are falling apart and we can draw these times together, and we can know each other as true brothers and true sisters. And this was what came about with the civil rights movement. We began to see that we do have different cultures, different backgrounds. But when these backgrounds can work together, the different strategies, the different perspectives, and the different viewpoints, that we can work together and we can create a greater whole. And so in the same way, with non-punishment, we're not looking on impeachment as something where we're shaming someone and we want to make somebody, our president in this case, suffer. Punishment never works. We simply want to say we've reviewed the data, we've looked at the data, we've considered our alternatives. We don't want to do a general strike, but we do have this power. All the religions, when they talk about a higher authority, ultimately when they're understood in a mature way, the power that they're talking about is a power that lies within. And each one of us knows how to cultivate it so that we can have access to not only our humanity, human rights, but we can also know what our divinity is. And by knowing that divinity, can move into new realities. I'm Paula Gloria. I thank you very much for joining me on this show, Farther Down the Rabbit Hole. I hope that you can stay tuned when I explore even more deeply the different religions vis-a-vis the Divine Mother, the 5 elements, and how we can bring about a world that we can enjoy even more, and we can enjoy each other even more. For more information, you can write or call 26 Gramercy Park South 7H, that's the Concordia Foundation, New York, New York, 212-982-0021. Or for those of you who don't like to write, because today that's not so much done, why don't you email me at rabbitholecentral@earthlink.net and tell me what you think about these topics: misprision of treason, why we need 9/11 truth in order to ensure that impeachment takes place, and how does a general strike figure into it based on what's happened in our past. I look forward very much to hearing from you. This is Paula Gloria.